Okay, if you're a person who thinks the skills of DBT, when they're integrated with the understanding of personality that we get from schema therapy, is applicable to you, then you identify as a person who's on the continuum of emotional sensitivity, and you probably feel as though you grew up in an emotionally invalidating environment. Today we're going to open up the exploration of the different parts of our personality that are heavily involved in the emotional distress that gets activated within our personality system. These parts are often trapped in our past experiences, and if so, they're the first thing that kicks in after our internal critics have had their judgmental way. They're also often the reason that we react with the behaviours that we later regret. So today, let's have a conversation about the parts of our personality that use emotional child modes of behaviour. At the centre of our personality, and pretty much the primary reason for everything we do that's designed to avoid our uncomfortable and unwanted emotional experiences, is what we call our vulnerable child. From a schema therapy perspective, this is how it is for absolutely everyone, regardless of what our childhood experiences might or might not have looked like. However, if we fall into the category of having a nature or a temperament that is more sensitive to our own emotional experiences, it usually plays out that the more challenging the events of our childhood were, the more vulnerability this part of our personality can develop. Some people learned how to work with the activation of this vulnerability using healthy and effective behaviours because they observe the way to do things in the environment around them. This helps them to internalise the skills that they need and then creates them as behavioural responses during the formative years of their lives. Other people, myself included, weren't exposed to these types of skills, or it might have been the case that our ability to internalise them was diminished for some reason. So we went about developing our own behaviour patterns that were simply designed to meet our unmet childhood needs. These behavioural responses belong to the different parts of our personality that create particular modes of behaviour that we're now trying to build awareness for. If you're someone that would describe yourself as a person who has emotional reactions to those external situations that you find yourself in that many of the people around you might describe as being really big or even larger than they actually needed to be, then there's a high probability you're blended with one of the parts of your personality that are usually the first line of defense for our vulnerable child. These emotionally reactive parts are simply acting out in ways that in schema therapy we call the emotional child modes of behavior, and their primary purpose is to protect that vulnerable child at the core of our personality from the emotional experience that they're afraid will completely shut down our ability to cope. Now, the most important thing to be aware of before we get into working with the parts that use these particular modes of behavior to protect those vulnerabilities is that what they're doing isn't bad, and it's definitely not wrong in any way. They're simply doing the only thing that they know how based on what we were exposed to and then learned to do when we were children ourselves. We're not trying to get rid of these parts, as that would not only be an impossible journey to go on, but it would also be not advisable. We're trying to connect with them mindfully to help them understand that they don't need to protect that vulnerable child that's within us in the way that they once did. Doing this work means practicing the skills of unconditional self-acceptance, so we can embrace the parts of our personality that are acting out in ways that don't line up with who we want to be. This supports us in the re-education process, teaching these parts the skills we have available to us now. When the maladaptive schema gets switched on within our personality system, we blend with these emotionally reactive parts. They grab the wheel to our metaphorical bus, taking our behaviours in a particular direction that's basically intended to protect the vulnerable child in some way. However, in actuality, what tends to happen is the use of a behaviour mode that provides some sort of short-term and instant relief, which often causes long-term problems in the bigger picture of living the life we want to live. When we can actually recognize the activation of these parts and then manage their behavioral responses to a level of tolerance within our system, we can use the skills of emotion regulation from dialectical behavior therapy, as well as following the therapeutic process of the Raven exercise that was created for this very specific purpose. When used in combination, this provides the information that parts need to let go of the burden of responsibility that they're currently holding on to. When a child feels a responsibility to protect another child, it takes away from their ability to simply be a child. This is often what's happening within our personality system. So re-educating our parts on what's happening right now, taking them out of the time that they're trapped in by informing them of the skills we have at our disposal to deal with the situation in a healthy way, helps to release the responsibility they hold for protecting this younger part. The activation of our emotional child modes is linked to our level of emotional maturity. When we're blended with a part that's behaving from the point of view that's connected to our emotional child modes, it stands to reason that our level of emotional maturity is in line with the dominant part. This is why for me, when I first stepped into living the life I want to live, being the person I wanted to be in the areas of life that were important to me, I honestly believe that at times my emotional maturity was probably at the level of a 6-year-old. The dominant parts of my personality were behaving in ways that lined up with a child of that age. I had to accept this was the way my system was reacting before I could actually work on it. Accepting these behaviors is the very first step that we need to take in order to be able to identify and then work with them within our personality system and our behavioral responses. If you're someone who believes that you may have parts of your personality that are behaving in emotional child modes, take a look at the list that's provided on the website page that's connected to this particular video to see if there are any that actually call out to you. When you find something that you think might be applicable, click on the link to access more information about each one, as well as finding a worksheet that was created to help identify the presence of these parts within your personality system. Identification leads to our ability to practice mindful awareness. If we're not aware of the dominant part that's active within our personality system, we don't open up the possibility of actually working with it. Take some time to explore the videos and the PDF worksheets that are available for each of the modes of behavior that you think are applicable to you. Remember, the primary purpose of these worksheets is to help us to figure out which of these parts we actually experience within our personality system as ineffective and maladaptive behavioral responses to the overwhelming emotional experiences that we're currently going through. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be releasing more information on these and many other modes of behavior that we use to cope. So keep an eye on the website and subscribe to the YouTube channel to stay up to date with all the latest information. I hope this video gave you some insight for the emotional child parts that you may have within your own personality system. If you want to know more about this or anything else we talk about at the Liberation Place, come join the live online meetings that I facilitate each week on Zoom for free. I'll leave some links to those groups in the description below. As always, thanks for watching. See you again soon. Take care, be safe, and be well.